Radio Grand Lac 92.1, le grand bain de la vie locale.
Your English Weekly. Your English Weekly. La chronique 100% en anglais de Radio Grand Lac avec Sinead.
Bonjour à tous ceux qui écoutent Radio Grand Lac 92.1 FM et bienvenue à l'émission Your English Weekly, animée par moi-même, Sinead Dupont-Pochebaron, professeur d'anglais. Cette émission stimule la langue anglaise et l'expression anglaise. Vous pouvez écouter toutes les semaines le mardi de 12h15 à 12h30. Chaque semaine, vous découvrez soit un nouvel article inspiré de Le Gardien, du magazine Vocab ou un étudiant de Your English Workshop ou l'université, comme aujourd'hui, avec Martin. Vous pouvez réécouter cette émission sur YouTube. Cette émission aujourd'hui est sponsorisée par Your English Workshop, qui est un centre de formation pour l'apprentissage de l'anglais certifié Calliope. Restez à l'écoute dans les 15 prochaines minutes pour notre expression de la semaine et notre conversation en anglais avec Martin Rial-Badé. Is that correct? Rial-Badé?
Yes.
OK. Et quelques nouveaux mots de la semaine. La leçon cette semaine est de le niveau B2, C1. Hi and welcome to Your English Weekly. My guest today is Martin Rial-Badé, a bookworm, just like teacher was last week. Martin is one of my students from the University of Savoy, Mont Blanc. Welcome, Martin.
Hello.
So, Martin, before we start, we're going to start with our expression of the week. So, the expression this week is to dig one's heels in. Have you heard of this expression before?
Yes, I have.
Ah, so what does it mean to dig one's heels in?
I believe it means to insist in a direction that is not currently working, but to go further anyway.
Okay, well, we'll see at the end if you're right. So, Martin, can you introduce yourself to our audience today that are listening to us?
Yes. So, I am Martin Rial-Badé. I come from Aix-les-Bains. I am currently in the last year of my master's degree in mathematics. As for my future job, I hope to become an author, but I would also like to work in research or in other scientific fields.
Okay, so today we're going to talk about an author because I know you're fascinated by books as well. I know that you love reading, that you love writing too, huh?
Yes.
So today you're going to talk to us about what author?
Patrick Rothfuss.
Okay, so who is Patrick Rothfuss? Now, before we start, I'm just going to ask a few words that you can explain to our listeners who are listening today. So let's start with the first word, chronicle. What is a chronicle?
A chronicle is a narration of events, usually in the form of books or other forms of narrations.
Okay. And today we're going to talk about a trilogy. So what is a trilogy?
It's a story composed of 3 books or 3 opus. Like, for example, everyone knows Star Wars, which is made of now 3 trilogy.
Okay, fantastic. And what is a spin-off?
A spin-off is a story that relates to another more important story, like some sort of an aside. That takes place in the same world, but focuses on a different character or a different event than the main story.
Fantastic. And the word crafted, because our listeners will hear that word today as well. Crafted, what does that mean, crafted?
Well, to craft is the action of creating something in a way like
that is different.
Yes, it's that
has been thought of differently with sort of something behind it?
Yes.
Okay. The word accumulated, what does that mean, accumulated?
To accumulate is to add something and then something else and again and until there's a lot.
Until there's a lot. Okay, fantastic. Now, the listeners, I learned a new word today. That's what I just said to Martin. I didn't know the word Sygaldry. Sygaldry. Can you explain to our listeners, Martin, what that means?
Well, Sygaldry, I believe it is a word that Patrick Rothfuss invented for his book. It's a sort of a magic art where people will craft objects, sometimes complex mechanism, using runic symbols to add to imbue magic into it. And one of the most common example in Patrick Rothfuss' book is the lamps, because there are lamps that can emit light without the risk associated with a fire.
Okay, and then we have these artifices.
Yes, so this refers to the different means of doing something, and in particular to the different magical arts.
Okay, so the artifices. Okay, and chiseled. We have the word chiseled. His writing is chiseled.
Yes, so that comes from sculpture. It's when you carefully carve something, but it can also be used in a more generic situation for someone that very carefully makes something.
Very good. And dispense small hints. So the word here is hints.
Yes, so a hint is an indication about something that helps you know about something without having it told completely.
Without having been told. Okay, so now let's talk about Patrick. So who is Patrick?
Patrick Rothfuss is an American fantasy author from Wisconsin. He studied English and received bachelor's and master's degrees. He wrote several award-winning books and now manages a charity, appears in podcasts, and participates in publicized tabletop role-playing games. Patrick Rothfuss' main work is the Kingkiller Chronicle. This projected trilogy centers on the innkeeper Kvothe, his head Bast, and their visitor chronicler, as Kvothe, over the course of 3 days, narrates his own life for chronicler to write down. Kvothe's story takes the reader all over the fictional world of Temerant, and sometimes even further. Most of Patrick Rothfuss' other works relate to the Kingkiller Chronicle in some ways. He created a strategic game, TAC, featured in the books. He also wrote several spin-offs focusing on side characters of the Kingkiller Chronicle and a tale mentioned in the Kingkiller Chronicle. Both the scenario and the Temerant world are very carefully crafted. The story includes several meta-fictional stories and legends, most of which appear to be derived from the same historical events. Kvothe, as a wandering trooper and musician, is at the root of some songs and stories that come back to him deformed, including rumors about himself that accumulated into his legend and played a part in chroniclers' interest.
Sounds very interesting. So who's Kvothe? Who is he?
So Kvothe is a genius in many domains, and he eventually becomes an arcanist and masters various magical arts such as Sygaldry, sympathy, and naming. The non-magic system of Temerant is complex, yet coherent. However, Kvothe doesn't give his audience and readers much information about the arts he doesn't practice, such as alchemy. Those magical arts play a major part in the scenario, yet never as a deus ex machina. It is often the case that these artifices have been introduced long before, through offhanded mentions in books, conversations, or lessons, for example. The countries and people of Temerant are also quite detailed. A few different languages are mentioned, often with some words or sentences appearing here and there in the books. Kvothe's poor mastery of one language plays a part in the scenario. Another nation has an unusual way of writing in the form of notes. Kvothe also visits the Fire Realm, a mythical place only accessible at specific times with its own culture, tales, and people, the Fae. But rather than this abundance of details, what I appreciate the most about the Kingkiller Chronicles is Pat Rothfuss's prose. His writing is chiseled and evocative yet vague enough that theories abound about the meaning of such or such formulation. It takes advantage of Temeran's many languages, our partial knowledge, Quote's unreliability as a narrator, etc., to hide the truth in plain sight or dispense small hints, such as when Quote is designated rather by his name or, on the contrary, by his innkeeper pseudonym. The writing is also beautiful, almost poetic. There is a whole chapter when Quote visits the Fiery Realm, where the characters talk in Alexandrine meter, which shows the time and effort spent on every little detail. And as a musician, I appreciate how Patrick Rothfuss captures Quote's music into words. There is, however, one flaw to the Kingkiller Chronicle. As of today, 11 years after the publication of the trilogy's second book, the final tome is still nowhere to be seen.
Well, all of that. Well done, Martin. Thank you so much for telling us about this. Now, Martin, how did you discover this author?
Well, it was through a friend at school who was reading the first book of the Kingkiller Chronicle, and who lent me the first and the second book.
Okay, and I presume when you've read the first book, you automatically want to read the second one.
Yes, well, I also really wanted to reread it. It's a difference with other books. Sometimes there's a scenario that holds everything together, and here, just the way it's written makes me want to reread, even if I know what's going to happen.
And did you read this book in English, or did you read it in French, or both?
Well, I first read it in French. I later found it at a library also in French, as well as a spin-off that I didn't know of before. And I recently offered the book in English to a friend for their birthday. And so I had a look at how it was written in English, but I haven't read it yet. The full book in English yet.
Okay. Well, when she's finished, perhaps she will lend it to you to reread in English.
Yes, I also was thinking of reading the full trilogy once it was completely published in English, but maybe that will take some time.
Yeah, it'll take some time perhaps because 11 years since they've been waiting for the third trilogy.
Yes.
So maybe we'll be waiting another few years still. And nowhere to be seen, you said earlier. So, okay. So let's come back to our expression, to dig one's heels in. So you were right. It is a phrase that means to refuse to give in. This idiom is used when a person stubbornly refuses to change an opinion or an action. Do you have any examples of this, Martin, by any chance?
Yes, it happens that in the Kingkiller Chronicle, Quote at the moment goes to the university to become an arcanist, but also to get access to the archives. And when he finally becomes an arcanist and has the right to go to the archives, he goes immediately, even though he's on painkillers at the time, and the receptionist doesn't want to let him in. And Quote does dig his heels in and insist. He also criticized the poetry of the receptionist who was trying to flirt with a girl at the time. And the receptionist does let him in, but gives him a candle to light himself, and a candle in the archives with all those books around. Obviously, it gets him... It's
not enough.
Yes, it gets him banned from the archives because of the danger. Of bringing a flame inside.
Of course, of course. Okay, well, thank you so much, Martin, for all of that today. And to all our listeners, well, that's all that we have today from us. But of course, if you wish to listen to this podcast again, don't hesitate to find us on YouTube and our Facebook page with the expression of the week. So I wish you all a wonderful week, and I'll be back with another guest next week. Also remember that we don't have our show at 12:30. It's now at 12:15. So Martin, thanks again for joining me on the air.
Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, you're welcome. So stay tuned for Jessica at 1:00 with all the latest tendency in decorations. And then at 5:00 this evening, you've got 1 hour one area with the Mutts-Haverlecks who will be talking tonight. So that's all from us today. So bye to you from us at you.
Your English Weekly. Your English Weekly. La chronique 100% en anglais de Radio Grand Lac avec Sinead.
Radio Grand Lac.